Welcome everyone to the program. We begin with the breaking news we're following at this time. The Federal Ministry of Health has confirmed the first case of the novel coronavirus disease, COVID-19, in Lagos, Nigeria. The victim is an Italian who arrived in Nigeria through the Lagos airport on Tuesday from Milan. He's currently being managed at the Infectious Diseases Hospital in Yaba, Lagos. He was tested positive by the virology laboratory of the Lagos University Teaching Hospital, part of the laboratory network of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC. The Federal Ministry of Health and the Lagos State Ministry of Health say the patient, whose name has not been made public, is clinically stable and with no serious symptoms. Well, new details just emerged that he was in Ogun State to conduct business when he fell ill. He was first taken to a hospital in the state and subsequently brought to Lagos, where he's currently being monitored. To stay with Channels Television as we continue our coverage of the COVID-19 case in the country.
Virus symptoms may not manifest within the first several days. So a person who gets infected may not show any signs at all within the first few days, like 3 or 4 or 5 days. And then the symptoms begin. So if that person has traveled within that window, they can get through anywhere and not be noticed. So the gentleman who came here apparently may have gotten infected at a point, but walked through the scene, the screening, with no symptoms. And by the time he got to his house, I think a day or 2 after, he started to feel unwell. And wisely enough, he went to a hospital. And there, the doctors examined him. And I believe they found that malaria was negative. And they knew the travel history. And immediately referred him to for a test in Lagos at the Luth testing center. And there it was discovered that he was positive for coronavirus. And
well, Channels Television is following this developing story, and we're on ground looking at all the angles for you. Meanwhile, at the Senate yesterday, lawmakers were dissatisfied with the federal government's efforts to ensure that the coronavirus is prevented from getting into the country. At the plenary, Senator Robert Borough told his colleagues that arrangements at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport to prevent COVID-19 from entering the country are severely inadequate. He wants the authorities to properly screen visitors coming into the country. The Senate is consequently mandating its committees on primary health care and health to work with the Ministry of Health to ensure thorough screening of travelers at all entry points.
Is that prevention is better than cure. When we landed in South Africa, we were not allowed to leave the aircraft for a good 30 minutes. Officers of the medical corps of the South African Army came into the aircraft and screened everybody before we were allowed out of this aircraft. When I arrived yesterday at the Nnamdi Azikiwe airport, there was no screening. All we were given is a sheet of paper to indicate whether we were sick, whether we are going to one country or the other, and how we'll be contacted in emergency. What are you contacted in emergency?
We're still at the National Assembly, but this time at the Green Chamber, a bill for an act to provide special funding, training and provision of modern security equipment for the military has passed through second reading in the House of Representatives. Some of the lawmakers who supported the bill emphasized the need to fund the military beyond the annual budgetary provisions, while others questioned the utilization of the funds so far provided for the fight against insurgency.
Nigeria is at war at the moment, but we don't have a budget that can finance a war. What we have at the moment, Mr. Speaker, is an envelope-based budget that cannot prosecute this war that we're in.
Even though I may not agree that we are at war, but I know that we are suffering from serious insecurity issue that needs funding. This particular fund is not going to be a conduit pipe for anybody.
Well, Nigeria's Minister of Information, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, is asking Nigerians not to fall for the antics of Boko Haram insurgents who, he says, are out to create a religious war in the country. The minister who addressed the media in Abuja says the insurgents are now targeting Christians in an attempt to trigger a religious war in the country. Recently, the insurgents killed Lawan Ndimi, chairman of the Christian Association of Nigeria, CAN, in Michika, Adamawa State, and Robville Dalap, a student of the University of Maiduguri, among others, in attacks perceived to be against Christians.
In the wake of a renewed onslaught by tireless military against Boko Haram and their ISWAP allies in recent times, the insurgents have apparently changed their strategy. They have started targeting Christians and Christian villages for a specific reason, which is to trigger a religious war and throw the nation into chaos. Apparently, they have realized how emotive and divisive religion can be when exploited by unscrupulous persons.
So let's take a closer look at this concern of the federal government. We're being joined now by Major Gabriel Adofiko, a retired military officer and a security expert. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Great to have you. I remember on February the 3rd, the president put out this article through ChristianityToday.com, and he specifically said in that article that Boko Haram is not specifically targeting Christians. And now the Minister of Information is saying that Boko Haram has started, and other terrorists have started targeting Christians and Christian villages. And, you know, there seems to be a disparity here. What do you think is responsible? Do we have new evidence, perhaps, that accounts for this, you know, seeming disparity?
Okay. Thank you very much, thanks for having me on. First, I would love to quickly put down a common fashion that anyone who appears on TV, because of our social crisis, we easily refer to ourselves as security experts. Every living Nigerian is an expert on this, because we are feeling the impact and we are experiencing a trend that is just not acceptable to our society, for the development of our society. However, I'd like to point out some basic facts about insurgency. Insurgency feeds on certain facts of life. It feeds on primordial values by societies. It feeds on weak areas of society, all in the desire to make itself prominent. In other words, bombing a marketplace to them is preferable to bombing a refinery. But you would say a refinery will be more economically important. But I tell you, bombing a marketplace gives them the acknowledgement they desire. Similarly, if you follow the trend carefully in the Nigerian situation, you will see that the insurgency process and progress in Nigeria has been picking on specific aspects of society that reflect this background I just gave to you. You'll find that they would go for children, and when they find we are not paying too much attention to children, they go for women. When they find we are not paying too much attention to women, they go for ethnic groups. And when they find we are not reacting the way they want on ethnic groups, they go for religious. These are primordial values, and they have found out that these values are very dear to the hearts of Nigerians. And so what they do is to feed on them or feast on them so that we can react. And we're just doing exactly that.
Okay, Major Adofiko, with this revelation now, if I may comment now, with this revelation, how does it affect the strategy, especially the fight against terrorism? Because now the minister says they have realized that Boko Haram and ISWAP and other allies of theirs are targeting Christians specifically. Do you expect the strategy to change?
Yes. The strategy would be, based on this background I just gave to you, our strategy would be, how can we de-emphasize the manifestation of these aspects, these trends they take? For example, they now go after, those days we talk about soft targets. Now we're talking about ethnic or religious targets. What we do is let Nigerians know, like the Honorable Minister has done, rather than make it sound like a groaning or an acrimonious expression, let it be known that this is the style of the enemy, and that please, in whatever circumstance, nobody should feel he's safe. Nobody should feel he could be exempted. Nobody could feel he could be left out based on this primordial identity that is being given to their points of attacks. In other words, the current approach of limiting the counterinsurgency operations just to military combat should be reviewed to include other aspects of social orientation, social sensitization, social focusing, that even the ordinary person. I'll give you a very typical illustration. If you go to a controlled environment, it used to happen during the era of Amadou Ahidjo in the Cameroons. If you arrive at a Cameroon village, within 30 minutes, the local gendarme authority there will know that a visitor has come to town. If you stay more than your express time frame, within 1 hour, the local security authority will know that somebody who came for this kind of business is exceeding his time.
This will perhaps point to the
situation.
I guess this perhaps also points to that phrase that everybody should join this fight, and you have said it, that everybody should indeed be a security expert. But on a final note, it would seem as though the minister is calling on religious leaders, saying that you have a role to play in this. But we know there's a difficulty in striking a balance. Religious leaders have to speak up, definitely, when they see ills in the society. But how do you think they will balance this now, seeing the statement from the minister?
Please, I want to dilute the emphasis on the statement. All the minister has done is letting us know that this is what the insurgents are doing. But all we need to do now is, if this is what they are doing, what do we do to change that narrative? And to do that, for me, I believe that, one, even as our gallant troops are on, carrying out their, what I call, more of curative solution, we should begin to develop approaches that will emphasize on the social preventive procedure. For example, information management in communities, local communities. I cannot understand where 100 bike riders will invade an open country at an approach of over 3, 4, 5 kilometers, and it is not noticed until they are in the city.
Okay,
that is not a purely military solution.
I'll have to come in here.
Solution.
I'll have to come in here for a moment. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I mean, they have been incisive so far. We've been speaking with Major Gabriel Adofiko, a retired military officer and a security expert. He believes everybody should be a security expert.